is the Rangers Journal Night.
Evening everybody and welcome to Rangers Journal podcast. I'm your host Scotty and I'm delighted to be joined by Kai and Doug tonight. Kai, how you doing, mate?
Very well, mate. Like I said to you earlier, it's not very often we get to be on together, so looking forward to it.
Good stuff, I know, mate. Doug, how you doing, pal?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Yourself?
Aye, not bad at all. So I thought tonight we would speak about new signings, get a chat about how we think they're going to, how they think that we as a club can get them to settle best. So far in this window, we've got Hefty and Ciala as kind of new players. Balogun's reconfirmed. Oscar Cortez is rejoined on a season-long loan. Diamonde's signed permanently, obviously. Is there anybody I've missed, guys? No? So I think that's us, isn't it? Right, okay. So I thought we would kind of... Doug, I'm going to come to you first on Hefty. What's your kind of thoughts on what kind of squad role is he going to have? Do you think he's going to be a signing that's maybe going to come in and start, or is he going to be somebody that's going to be given time to settle off the pitch before making an impact on it?
I think he'll get an opportunity. I think he'll get opportunities. The left side is a position that we've not really had a nailed down player. So obviously the Barisic is left, so the Yilmaz is the kind of incumbent to the shirt as it stands technically. But I mean, he's not. In the last 2 seasons he's been here, he's not really nailed that position down for himself. So I mean, if I was him coming into the club, I'd be thinking to myself, there's a shirt to be won there. And going out and looking to impress the manager and win it. I think a lot of the time when you sign younger players, the tendency is to think that they'll maybe be sort of starting off in a kind of secondary position. But I mean, I think, looking at the profile of the players across the board, they're all younger players. We're really taking the squad age down. And so I don't think that's something we can necessarily take for granted. So yeah, I mean, I think the shirt's there for him to win if he wants it.
Kai, do you think on Hefty that because he's coming in and kind of not a big fee, Ridvan Yilmaz is obviously your starter if he's fit this summer? Do you think that can help the settling in process for Hefty?
I think the age Ridvan is as well maybe helps. They're a bit similar ages. I think Ridvan's maybe a wee bit older, but I think having players around, obviously Doug said a lot of the players that have been targeted are younger. So it'll be good for them that come in, that those new players that are also kind of the same age are looking to settle in. You obviously need more experienced players there to kind of let them know what the club's about, let them know what the country and the city's about. But I think from a starting point, like having players round about the same age is probably good. It's interesting what Doug was saying, obviously, about is Ridvan shut at this point, but I don't think necessarily Hefty's maybe only going to play left back. I think we obviously spoke to Stella and Thassos from This Is Mappa, and all these friends seem to make a really good winger. Like they obviously pointed out the kind of defensive stuff he needs to improve on, but I think it's a different player to Ridvan in that I think we looked at his crossing accuracy was like really high, especially for like the minutes he was playing. So he looks to get down the line kind of more similar to Barisic and Ridvan. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, especially if Ridvan stays. But like towards the question and us targeting younger players, it's probably good for kind of new players to come in and have a group of younger players essentially try to like go through the same thing. Probably helps them out that way.
Aye, definitely. It's a valid point. I think I agree, mate. Doug, I'll come back to you on Clinton and Ciala. Obviously, we've done the breakdown pod on Ciala, so if you haven't seen it, we've got Matteo Vismara from, I think he used to cover Milan youth football, head over and see interview and any pod after it. It's really, really good. In terms of Ciala, what kind of role, is it similar to Hefty for you again, Doug? Are you expecting Ciala to come in and kind of be one of the backup centre halves, or do you think that there's a spot there to compete?
My guess would be that he would be slightly further down in the pecking order purely due to his lack of experience. So I do think he's coming into play though, and I do think he will have a role because that was that's apparently the reason they left AC Milan. They offered him a deal, but weren't guaranteeing him first team football, and that's what he was looking for. So we presumably, therefore, must have said to him that he's going to get the opportunity to play. Otherwise, why would he have agreed to sign? So again, I think he will play a part, but I don't think there's necessarily. I don't think it's quite as open as it is for Hefty, because, like I say, there's not a position there, or not a player there that's like really nailed the place down. Whereas we do have centre backs that have played well, and certainly in terms of experience and things are ahead of him. So I think he does come in as a backup, but with again, I think Clement's going to give these players the opportunity, and obviously if he plays well enough, then anyone can win a shirt if they play well enough. So
fair enough. Kai, do you think that how do I word this properly? Do you think that the future of Ben Davies could have an impact on how many games Nsiala plays? Obviously, Nsiala is a left-footed centre-half. Ben Davies has had an indifferent Rangers career. He's had his good spells as well as not being in the team. I can't remember him having a really, really bad spell. I think that's fair to say. But he's not been the most consistent performer in a Rangers jersey. Do you think if that's a sale that goes through, then Nsiala would be expected to step up, or do you think more cover would get brought in?
I think it definitely would put him up the pecking order a wee bit. Like you say, Ben Davies is the only natural left-sided centre-half we've got. So it's at this point you would assume he's kind of further ahead of Nsiala. I would expect we kind of look at getting more bodies in for centre-backs, but it's a tough one. Like, Nsiala could come in, he could have a brilliant pre-season, maybe he starts one of the Champions League qualifiers and then he plays really well, and then that's him nailed on. That's the kind of unknown we don't know right now. Or Ben Davies could do the same. Like, if we can't get rid of Davies, I thought he played well towards the end of last season. I think I agree with what you say, Scott. He's not necessarily had bad spells. He's had a bad performance, obviously the Parkhead performance, and then a couple of bad performances here and there. I think his issue is he just gets bullied too easy. Like, he's decent on the ball. He's also decent on there, but it's those battles we always talk about, those kind of physical strikers in Scotland, the Theo Bears, the Simon Murrays. Those are the type of strikers that bully him. But that's who you're playing every second week. So that's kind of what we can't have, and that's Ben Davies' issue. So if we do sell him, I think it does move Nsiala up the pecking order a wee bit, but I would expect we do more business in that area, because I'm not sure how I'd feel kind of taking in. Obviously, Doug mentioned his lack of experience. He's not played any first team football.
Aye.
So I think I'd be a bit tentative going into the season with him as the first choice left-sided centre half.
Kyle, stay with you see in terms of Ben Davies and Nsiala, so they're both left-sided centre backs. You'd expect them, if they're both here, to be challenging for that jersey. It brings a kind of natural balance to the left side of defence. Do you think that Rangers are going down the right route here, bringing in a player that's coming into Scottish football, doesn't really have any first team experience, but also if you compare him to Ben Davies, who came in for a $4 million fee for Liverpool, kind of coming into prime of his career, he's not done it, he's not quite set header light in a Rangers jersey either. Do you know what I mean? So do you think this is a kind of a safe strategy Rangers are trying to implement?
I think it's definitely much less risky. I mean, we talk about kind of guarantees, but there's no guarantees in transfers. Like, there's no guarantee that anyone come in, no matter how well they've done in the league. We've seen it with players that played with other Scottish clubs that have been kind of top of the best of the rest and come into both old firm teams and just not really done it. So it's much safer. Like, I think we're probably going to lose money on Ben Davies, let's be honest, despite the fact he's not been poor. I don't think he's ever shown anything to justify a £4 million price tag. I think that's fair to say. Like you say, he's not been terrible. We're not going to get nothing for him. Like, English teams will pay money. I just don't think we'll probably get the £4 million back. So while it is a risk and while no one is a guarantee, I think it's a much safer strategy. Like you say, to go for these 19, 20, 21-year-olds. They've played at really good levels. Like, I'm obviously saying he's not had any first team experience, but there'll be some of the boys that he's playing with or playing against would walk into teams in Scotland. Do you know what I mean? Like, these guys in the academies of your Inters, your ACs, your Juves, like, they're obviously quality players, and a lot of them do make the step up. So it's going to still be a decent level despite it not being first team. So I do think I think it's a safer strategy to go down the route we're doing instead of spending 4 million on like Championship players, lower end Premier League players. I still would like us to take the risk every now and again. Like obviously, if we're talking about kind of fees for the likes of Romani, if you're talking about €6 million, I do think now and again those punts are worth it. But while we're trying to build a player training model, I think deals like Enciala where we really should be focusing.
Aye, definitely. Wallace, I'm assuming your comment is due to Scotland tap, but I'm not the biggest international fan, but my country's playing tonight, so we're going to try and get on board. If anybody's not seen a Europod, head on over and watch it. Tom and Billy put on a cracking show last night. It's there for everybody to see. So thanks for the assist on that podcast, Wallace. Doug, I'm going to stick with you. See, in terms of the defence, now, well, the name of this pod is to how can we, like, obviously Diamonde and Cortez come in. They settled. I would like to say the two players hit the ground running safe enough. I think they were both solid performers. But from what we've seen of Cortez and what we've seen of Diamande, I think it's safe to say that they're going to be good acquisitions. Now, I was wondering back at the time, what have Rangers done to be able to get these guys performing like that on the park? I don't think it's just necessarily down to ability. I think it's down to what the club can do off the pitch. Now, in defence, there's an awful lot of turmoil just now over the speculation of futures with James Tavernier and Connor Goldson. Who's going to help the likes of Clinton Ciala settle in and Tefty at left back if you sell Goldson and Tavernier? Because ultimately, I've never been the biggest Connor Goldson fan, but I've always said he's an average defender with exceptional leadership skills. So, who's going to speak in Ciala and Hefty through a match if they're on the left side of defence?
Well, in terms of on-field, I mean, the first thing would be maybe kind of looking at the real basics, like who speaks their language. One, I suppose you could say, not necessarily a downside, but one added complexity about some of the markets we're looking in is that, they may or may not speak English. And if they do, it might be quite minimal. So there's things like that. And I have been looking through the squad in terms of some of the players, both that we've signed and have been looking at. So Ciala, he's French. Clement obviously managed in Monaco, so presumably he'll have a little bit of French in there, and Belgians often, I think Belgian and French is pretty much similar. So, or they speak French. So I think there's options there. Obviously, Raskin's Belgian, Desser's spent time in Belgium, so I think there's options for him. FD speaks Portuguese. As far as I'm aware, we don't have any Portuguese speakers in the squad, but somebody maybe does. There's probably some similarities to Spanish, so maybe some can help there, but that might be one that might need a little bit of help. In terms of the players we've been linked with, we've got Romani. He's likely to speak, I think, Albanian, given the region of the country he comes from. There are similarities. He's also been in Romania, so he might maybe speak a little bit. There's some crossover with Turkish, so maybe Yilmaz can help with him. I cannot pronounce his name now. Kabadai, the German lad that we've been linked with.
Aye.
You've got Balogun for him, so that's fine. And the young winger, Mofa King, he speaks English, so he's good. So there's that kind of angle in terms of talking through the pitch. But there's a lot of basics that I'm sure they'll be able to teach pretty quickly. There'll be code words. I know that a lot of teams use code words for various things like tactical adjustments and stuff like that. So there's loads of little things you can do in that respect. You touched on Tavernier and Goldson maybe leaving. Those are big changes in terms of dressing room harmony and welcoming in players. From what I've heard, Tavernier is meant to be very good at that, welcoming players into the squad and making sure that they feel like a part of the group. Balogun is also meant to be obviously good in that respect. That's one of the reasons we've kept him, because he's a good voice in the dressing room. But I do think there's maybe a vacuum there for players to step into. I mean, Jack and Davies, Arfield in the past were all meant to be really good at that kind of thing as well, and they're all players that have left. So hopefully behind the scenes there are players that are doing that. But the biggest person that's going to help is off the field, which is Katie Lamont, which I spoke to you about earlier today. So she's, if anyone doesn't know, Katie Lamont is the head of player liaison services for Rangers, which basically the player liaison is the person whose job it is to liaise with players and help them with everything from day-to-day life. So that's, from the moment they arrive, setting up their bank accounts, getting them homed properly, what do they do with their houses, figuring out, are they going to have language difficulties, and if they are, get them translators and all that kind of thing. Katie herself speaks French and Spanish, so she's got some, obviously, stuff that she can do there, and she's going to be the first port of call for issues for players. So, she's the most important person probably in the club, to help get players settled off the pitch so that they can focus on what they're doing on the pitch.
Doug brings up a very good point here in terms of we've been on about all summer we need to got out of the medical department, we need to sign a younger profile player, we need to got a squad out, start again, rip up, start again. But as Doug just says about Katie Lamont here, she's probably the most important person at Rangers just now, considering the profile of player we're bringing in and how we're going to get them settled on and off the park now. The reason I done this pod is because of how good Diamande and Cortez were when they first came in. Now, I genuinely think that Clermont has implemented some changes off the park to allow the players to become the best version of themselves on the park. How important is Katie, do you think?
It's going to be massively important, mate. And just after what Doug was going through, obviously Danilo's there for Hefty. So Danilo was obviously at his kind of announcement and that, and I don't know how good his English was, but the two of them were obviously communicating quite a lot through that. So it's good the club's obviously recognised that. I don't know if they would have known each other beforehand. I wouldn't have imagined they'd cross paths unless they've spoken kind of through this move happening. So club obviously recognises that it's important to have players like that when players come in. I don't know if they'll maybe do similar when Ciala comes in, but it's like the player liaison or the player liaison leader. So can't remember what Katie's kind of title is, but it's going to be massive for these young guys coming in because a lot of them maybe won't be able to bring their families over. They might not have a family yet. They might be kind of young single guys coming over, so they might genuinely be coming over on their own. So that was kind of why I said earlier on about the profile's interesting, because if you get 3 or 4 of these young guys, if they get, obviously they need to get on as well. Not everyone gets on personally, but if you're bringing them all in at the same time, then it could be a case of they make their own wee group and they help kind of each other settle, and then that kind of filters out into the more experienced players, and then it becomes a bigger core group. Obviously, I know you're a big football manager fan, Scott. You know how important that kind of team hierarchy is in the game now. That you obviously want your players to jump up those kind of leadership groups. Always start down the bottom, and it's about getting them kind of ingrained with the rest of the team. So I think the player liaison is going to be massive at the start, and then it's all about the other players and the kind of coaching staff around there. But it would be, like you say about kind of Cortez and Diamande, the way they settled, it'd be really interesting to see what happens behind the scenes then, if there is something new that's kind of offered to the players to help them settle. So as far as I'm aware, there's no one really that they'd immediately kind of be able to speak to or relate to. Such, I don't think there's any players they knew previously, or I don't know if there's a crossover with some of the languages that they would have been able to communicate. But it could be really interesting to know the behind the scenes of that, what happens in like their day 1, day 2, and how that looks and who it is it shows them about if they're just left it on their own. I think that's something that'd be really interesting that, I don't know, we might be able to do some digging into and see what kind of goes on there if we can find out that information.
Paul's just brought up a very good point in terms of Cifuentes. Cifuentes is an example of somebody that's came over from a different country. And he's not settled. And I don't know if that's something Clermont's maybe looked at when he's come in and he's thought, right, well, we can learn for Cifuentes and do X, Y, and Z with Danilo and Cortez. So it's a good kind of comparison. Mr. Shays has just come on there and says, we're signing too many development players. Personally, I don't think so. I think that we're in the right market, but I do think that we need to fix the leadership group in terms so that we can ensure that these players get the best chance to have good performances. Doug, I'm going to come back to you on kind of player circumstances, living arrangements, translators. Do you think that, how do I word this properly? So, in terms of leadership group, having goals and go, I'm a big kind of fan for Paddy McNair. We done a Paddy McNair pod a while back. It's brilliant. Everybody should go and check it out as well when the story broke about him potentially signing. He would be somebody I would look to within the squad if he were to sign to help settle these players because of just his experience in football. How important is it that we get that experience in the squad to let these guys gel together?
I think it's massively important. You need to have players in the squad that are going to be able to lead the players, not just in terms of football, but like say in terms of settling them in and getting them in the team, feeling a part of the group. And they can really make or break a group as well. I've actually got this feeds into really nicely a quote that I found this afternoon that I quite liked, just from an ESPN article that was talking to a player liaison officer. They remained anonymous for the purposes of the interview, but they said if you have 9 good lads in a team, you can accommodate a couple of difficult ones. If the split's 8-3, you have a problem. The ideal is 10-1, but you're very lucky if you get that. I worked for a team that was relegated a few years ago, and we lost a guy who I regarded as the strongest captain I ever worked with. All of a sudden, the moral fibre of the dressing room was lost, and things became so difficult that I didn't want to be around footballers anymore. But on another occasion, one player made sure that the rest of the team helped to pay my wages when the club was going through a bad time financially. You end up seeing the full spectrum of society in a dressing room. So I think that really highlights there, you mentioned there the loss of one strong captain, completely changed their dressing room when they were going through a difficult period. And obviously, I'd like to think next season we'll not be facing anything as difficult as relegation, but the pressure is pretty much the same in terms of, the team will be under pressure to win and to win everything. And that's a big pressure, particularly for new players and young players that are learning. So, I think that demonstrates how key it is to have the right people in those roles and indeed to have somebody to fill those roles in the first place.
Doug, I think it's just having good people at a club, really, innit, that can help a player settle in. Like, we've all walked into that kind of working environment where, if you're walking into a hornet's nest or not, and if you're walking into a bad environment, you don't want to be here. If you're walking into a good environment, you might not want to be here, but you're not as moody if you're in it, like when you're in a job. Do you know what I mean? It can be something as simple as that. Just a
People
good working environment for these players.
Definitely, people can make all the difference. I mean, I know in my work, they have countless people who've come and don't like the job itself, but they always would say that they love the people and that would be what gets them through the day. And there's no reason that football would be any different to that. If you're in a dressing room that's really got good vibes around it, then that's going to carry you through the difficult times when it feels worse. My dad always likes to comment on when a team's losing, you seem to get more niggly injuries, and it's this idea that everyone wants to play when it's going well, but if it's not going as well, these little excuses can creep in, and again, having that right environment can help avoid that, because you can have that. It's okay, we're going through a tough time, but we're in this together. We're going to get past it. We're going to get back to winning, whatever it might be, and that'll come from the individuals.
Guy, that kind of brings me on to, obviously, Nsiala is not really in the same environment as Hefty, but what I mean is we're targeting players for South America and all these kind of Morocco, these different kind of nations with kind of hostile crowds, and we've touched upon it on other pods, but we'll get into it a wee bit here. Do you think that that's part of the strategy for Rangers, is targeting people with fan bases that demand of them, and not like somebody down south like Watford? No disrespect to Watford, but they're hardly going to be demanding to win every week. Do you know what I mean? If they got a good draw, they get a good draw kind of thing. It's probably a rubbish example, but do you think that can help the players settle as well, coming for that background?
I think mentality is probably a massive thing. When you look at the likes of Lammers and Dessers coming in last season, they were playing for sides fighting relegation. I'm not saying they're not playing for big clubs, they're playing for big clubs in Serie A in front of big crowds, but playing for sides that are battling for like 4 and 5 wins the whole season, like it's completely different. There's obviously pressure when you're trying not to get relegated, but it's a different ball game than being expected to win every week, competing in Europe. Like it's just not the same. That's maybe why I think it could be a strategy. Obviously, we've heard stories about what the kind of football's like in Cyprus. Obviously, coming from South America as well, like it's the crowds are feisty over there. Do you know what I mean? Like it's tame over here compared to some of the stuff you see. Obviously, targeting the likes of Galdames as well, and all the links that have came from over there. I think if it is a strategy they're deliberately going for, I think it's really smart because mentality, as everyone knows, is a huge thing. Like some people just can't kind of rise to wear the shirt, and it doesn't matter your ability a lot of the time. It doesn't matter how good you are as a player. You can clearly see how Lammers has done going to Utrecht. You can, like I've seen some clips floating about from last pre-season last week. You can see how good Lammers is in the ball. There's clearly ability there. Like even the one he obviously misses in the Old Firm game at Ibrox, like the ability to get into that position. There's ability there. It's just not every player can occur it, and I think mentality's a massive thing on that. And I probably targeting players that are used to like hostility and they're used to demands. These players that are competing towards the top league. Obviously, Apoel win the league. I think Egerman, I think his club, if they've not won the league, they're up there. They're up there competing. Like we keep saying we want to go for players that are in form instead of these like broken players that we try to fix or we try to get them back to what they used to be. We now seem to be targeting players that are on the up, they're in form, and I hope it's deliberate. It does seem like it would be a deliberate thing to target players that are used to the different environment, used to the demands, and hopefully it turns out different than kind of what we had last summer.
Doug, have you got any thoughts on it?
I think, I mean, again, looking at the sort of the age profile and the trajectory that I'm sure the players want their careers to go, it's something that should really align with the club as a whole. You know, these are, if you take NCR, for example, you know, this is a boy coming from AC Milan, an absolutely massive club in terms of sort of world football tradition. And I've no doubt that, you know, his goal would have been to turn out for them, play in Serie A, and do the best he can and be winning trophies and things like that. So those goals don't change coming to Rangers. He still wants to play football. He still wants to win trophies. He still wants to get to the highest level he can. And the only difference between the two is obviously if you step into Milan, you're stepping into a top 5 league. If you're playing in Scotland, you know, you're going to want to probably make a step up at some point. But, you know, we're realistic to know that, well, that's where we are in the totem pole of greater football. And so that's fine. We shouldn't, you know, I have no issue when a player comes in and talks about wanting to play in the Premiership or whatever, because I'm sitting there going, well, that's fine, because the only way you're going to do that is if you play well for us. If you play well for us, big teams will pay attention because we are a club that teams know, right, well, this is a club that has pressure on it, that is challenging for things, that is a big club in stature, even if not in the league that they play. And therefore, the traits that we're putting into, or that we will look to put into these players, are the traits that they'll be looking for as well. And then, you know, there'll be some benefits to Scottish football as well, toughening up players and things like that as well. So it should hopefully all align. I think the difference with when you're signing these players, like if we use Cantwell as an example of the kind of the broken player, you know, he was someone that had lost his way in the game after looking bright. And that can align as well in terms of, you know, they want to get back to an upward trajectory. But I think you've a bigger risk there because, you know, if they've proven to be broken once, then you've the risk that they kind of are stuck there. And then often those players tend to be older in the kind of mid-20 area, whereas if you get them in that very early 20s, you have a bit more time and opportunity, I think, as well. And they're maybe a bit more malleable still in terms of development. and that seems to be something that is going to be a big thing under Clermont and Coppin, developing players, and Coppin's got a good record for that.
Aye, definitely. Kai, how important is the likes of Nils Coppin and Philippe Clermont going to be to settling these players in? What do you think their roles is going to be? Because I know Coppin's so far got his likes of Hefty and Ciala in the door, but I don't think his job's done there. I think he's obviously still going to have a part to play in the players settling in, because he's one of the faces that they've seen when they've met him to discuss contract negotiations, etc. How important are these guys to settling these players in?
I think they're massive, mate. I don't just think they're massive in getting them to settle in. I think they're massive in actually getting them here as well. We've obviously seen Coppin's been to the transfer summit that kind of conference is called. He's already been there twice. Apparently, it's where he spoke to Cortez's agent the first time. He's obviously been there again recently. Apparently spoke to Romani's representatives there. I don't know kind of how true that is, but that's what the rumours were saying. So him getting out there and speaking to the agents, I'm also sure in the Hefty video when you seen him come in, I'm sure Coppin was there as well. Like as soon as he walked through the door, I'm sure Coppin was there to kind of see him in. It looked like they'd obviously already met before, which is a good thing. And then Clermont's there as well. Coppin's going to be the first contact, kind of the middleman essentially that speaks to their agents, that kind of sells them the dream of coming to Rangers, and then Clermont's obviously the man that helps implement that dream to them. So they are, like, them being a team's a massive part of this, because kind of they need to be selling the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Like Coppin can't be going and saying we're going to do, like, going to agents and saying we're going to do this for your player, we're going to develop them this way, they're going to get like this many minutes now, this many minutes then, if they play well, blah blah blah, and then Clermont's not doing any of that. So they obviously need to be really close together, and then, like I say, the players are going to go through Coppin first, and then it's up to Clermont to kind of fulfil the dream that they've been sold. So I think Coppin's massive in getting them in, and Clermont's the one that helps keep them there, helps with the development, and helps sell that dream. I'm kind of the same boat as Doug as well. Like, I don't mind. Like, obviously, Raskin made the comments like he wanted to play for Chelsea. Like, I don't mind that, because, again, as Doug said, the only way you're going to get to Chelsea is by playing really well for us. It might take one move, and then you play well there, and then get that move. But you play well here, you're going to get us a lot of money and go and make that move. Like, I want players that are ambitious like that. Like, I don't want players to, as much as we'd all love everyone that comes to Ibrox for their dream to be to play for Rangers, see, unless you're a Rangers fan, it's not a realistic thought process, is it? So we want these players to come in and think, I want to play the Premier League, I want to play, like, compete for the Champions League, I want to compete for kind of the top 5 leagues and whatever. We want players to come in and do that, because that's what the player trading model is. That's the whole point in it. We bring these players in, with Coppin's help, Clermont helps develop them, we go and sell them on, and we start the cycle again. And that's the only way the club's going to become self-sustainable. Obviously, with the money issues we've had in recent years and try to get back in the Champions League, if we can't do that consistently, developing players needs to be the way we go about it.
Doug, you want to add?
No, I totally agree with that. Like you say, ambition is a driver. So if we want players to show passion and push the team forward, then ambition is what they're going to have. I don't think I want to hear a player coming in and going, "Oh, it's always been my dream to play in the SPFL." As much as I want them to stay around for a while, if that's the ceiling of your ambition, then we've probably got a problem. Because I want these players to not only to have ambition to go else in terms of potentially going elsewhere, because they want to play at the highest level, but they can get that taste with us as well, playing in Europe. So that's why I want to hear players coming here going, I want to play at the highest level I can, because that's, again, to do that requires a successful Rangers, because we win the league, you get that Champions League opportunity, and again it then hopefully feeds that cycle. Young players coming in with ambition, driving forward, pushing the team forward, and if we can just get that into a cycle, then that's how we'll get to the sort of the trading model we want to get to. One thing I thought I'd just touch on really quickly. I saw a comment about I think it was a wee bit away now about Clement signing players from old clubs that he trusts. My thought on that is purely that I don't think I'm not sure there's many that maybe align with what we need right now, or that align with our kind of transfer model maybe, and that's possibly why he's not sort of dipped back to his other clubs. Also coming from Monaco, probably a lot of their players are probably slightly out of our price range, I'd imagine. So I thought we'd just touch on that a little bit, but yeah, I think see, ambition is a big driver, and so I think that's a key thing for our players to have.
Kai, I'm going to come on to you about Connor Barron and Liam Kelly. Liam Kelly was club captain in Motherwell, Rangers youth, knows the club inside out. He'll have a certain influence, I would imagine, with being captain in Motherwell. I think he's going to come in and have more dressing room influence. I'm not saying he's going to play for a start. How do you think these boys coming in could have a positive effect on any signings that are coming from out with Scotland or the UK?
I think Kelly's obviously a big one. Where, like you say, he came through the youth setup. He knows the Scottish game. He's a Scotland international, former Motherwell captain. Like, he's obviously a leader. You don't just get made the club captain for no reason. So I think that's a big thing coming in. Another leader, as much as obviously Butland looks like a leader as well. It doesn't just matter that you have leaders on the pitch and when the game's being played. Like you say, for these guys, most of their time spent like on the training ground and kind of maybe socialising with the players outside of that. So to have players there that are leaders, the training ground, even a leader on the bench. You know what I mean? Like, it's important to have them all over the place. Like, you want your manager to be a leader, but your manager's on the sidelines. So you do need them everywhere, kind of in and around the club. So even if Liam Kelly comes in and plays a couple of cup games, he could still have a massive influence. Not even just the new guys coming in, like the youth players as well. Like, he's been through what they've been through. He's obviously went a different route about it and went to Motherwell to get the first team football, but he's went and done that, became a Scotland international and came back to the club. So he's got a wealth of experience to kind of pass on there. He's been in the position of the youth players, and some of the players coming in might feel in the same boat. Like, they might feel like they're coming in as youth players, and he'll be able to kind of ease them in. Then obviously Barron's another player that knows the Scottish game. He'll know what it obviously means to play against a club like Rangers, so he'll have an idea of what it's like to play for the club. He's also young as well. I think he's still 21. He might have just turned 22. He's in and around that age that the players are coming in, so he'll be the same age. Obviously knows Scottish football. We don't have a lot of kind of young Scottish players in about the first team, so bringing him in that's in that same age bracket could also be huge, as much as he might not know everything about the club inside and out or the city. Like, you'd imagine he knows enough about Rangers, about playing for the club, and about Glasgow as a city that he still might be able to help those younger players coming in sell.
Aye, definitely, mate. All valid points. Doug, have you got any add on Liam Kelly and Connor Barron?
Yeah, I agree. Everything Kai said there's bang on, and I think in particular the point about like players all over the place. A great example of that, I think, is when we had Firth in the squad. Firth was nowhere near the team like at practically any point, but apparently was like hugely popular like across the squad. And the fact that Gerrard's now brought him in as a coach over in over where he is now, I think speaks volumes for the effect Gerrard obviously thought he had. And so this is a guy that came in, got to really love the club and seemed to have a really positive impact. I do remember like the clip when we at the full-time whistle at Leipzig, and you see at one point, I think it's slightly in the background, Alan McGregor, and this big massive smile suddenly comes across his face, and it's because Andy Firth's coming over to give him a big high five following the win. And so you want those players dotted over. They don't have to necessarily be the captain or a key player. They can be someone that's in the background that's still having a positive effect, still geeing the players up. And in some ways, those type of players probably are that I've got a really good chance to do that particularly well, because there's maybe a little bit of less pressure. Well, there is less pressure on them. Let's face it, because they're not playing, and they know, particularly if it's a third or fourth goalie, your chances are likely to be slimmer. So you can kind of probably be a little bit more relaxed, which is going to help the guys that are playing all the time and do have the pressure and the stress on them. So I think there's a big thing about that. And the other thing, Kai touched upon the manager as well. This was something I forgot to say in one of the pods when we were talking about leadership. We talk a lot about the club captain and leadership in terms of players, but I don't think we talk enough about the fact that, for me, leadership starts with the manager. That's where it all comes from. The manager is the leader of the squad. He's the one that's putting it all together, making the decisions. And one thing I think, for me anyway, that is very obvious in terms of creating a certain mentality is when you compare how we were mentally as a team under Gerrard, particularly if you're looking at things like Old Firm games, and compare that to how we've changed since Gerrard has left. Because I think that was one of the things that impacted Gio's reign, because I don't think he was as good as that man management. Gio was very good at the tactical side, but I don't think he was as good at the man management side. And for me, one of the things that's kind of told over time was that I feel like the Gerrard effect wore off over time. But we got enough out of it that, obviously to have the Euro run and everything else. Because if you look at players like Tavernier and Goldson and that have been around for a long time, they were absolute beasts when they were under Gerrard. And they had everything that we complain that they don't have now under Gerrard, in terms of they were snarling, they did look like they hated Celtic, they did have that bit of nastiness about them at times, whereas now we talk about them lacking all of that. And I think part of that is the manager's effect. We've seen Clement come in and stamp himself on the team. There's the big decision he made when he pulled Cantwell off the park in the first half, or near the end of the first half of a match, and that's statement management. That's saying, look, if you're not doing what I'm telling you to do, and that's being a strong leader. Sometimes you have to make that example to make sure that everyone else knows the buck starts with me, which means the buck will stop with me. And as long as he follows it up with that second part, then he'll get the respect from the players and get the buy-in. And I think that was something that Gerrard was able to do. He lived the passion of the club and got into it, because I think he was a good choice at the time, because I think there's a lot of similarities between Rangers and Liverpool in terms of the sort of the passion of the fans and the way they view themselves. Liverpool have been kind of fallen giants that have risen back up under Klopp. We were a fallen giant that were looking to rise back up. So there was a lot of sort of similarities there that really Gerrard, I thought, really bit into and grasped. And that's what I want to see from Clement. There's been hints of it, and I want to see more of that. And I think you maybe see that if Tavernier goes and he gets to choose his own captain, it'll be really interesting to see who that person is, because that's going to be the one that's presumably who he sees as the reflection of himself, or maybe not either the reflection of himself or a counterpart to himself, to do his leadership on the pitch, and I think that'll be interesting to see how big a difference that can make.
Kai, right, this is the kind of tricky part I've waited to ask you. Fans' expectations. So we get Cyril Dessers, Sam Lammers, Danilo all come in for a combined £11+ million. Around about 13, actually 14 million. Not one of them's done it this season for various reasons, in my eyes. Maybe Dessers has to an extent, but so you look at it in the kind of the grand scheme of things, with we've not spent that last summer. We've no, I wouldn't even say we've spent like upwards of £2 million so far on the players that have come in, apart from Diamandi. Do you think we need to taper our expectations a wee bit with the likes of Hefty and Ciala to let them get settled, or should we be Rangers fans and demand what we always demand?
I think no matter what I say, mate, and no matter what I think, we're going to be Rangers fans. Like
Right.
it's easy to sit and say that now, but like as Rangers fans, I'm sure it was either Billy or Tom that mentioned it on the Iggyman pod about we're really good at tearing players down, but we're also really good at building players up. Like someone's easily like if Hefty starts at left back or whatever, first game of the season, he gets a goal and an assist or has a brilliant game. He's going to be the best left back we've ever signed. Next, Roberto Carlos has a terrible game. Why do we let go of Barisic? Do you know what I mean? Like it's the nature of being a Rangers fan. But I don't think the expectations are ever going to be tapered. But like I said earlier, that's why I mentioned like Dessers and Lammers fighting relegation last season. Like we want guys coming in that are kind of not towards the top of their games. They're obviously young guys, but they're fighting at the top of the table. They're playing in front of passionate fans. They're used to expectation, whereas like Lammers and Dessers weren't. Last season, it would have been a miracle if they obviously avoided relegation and stayed in Serie A. Like it's a different ball game. It's a completely different frame of mind playing to that to be expecting to win 38 games of the league season. It's obviously never happened before, but that's the expectations of Rangers playing you out to win every single game. Obviously, the expectations are maybe slightly tapered in Europe, maybe not so much when we play at Ibrox, but the expectations are slightly tapered there. But I don't think that as fans generally they're going to get much time. It's going to be the same as it's always been. But I do think because of the age, there might be a slight bit more patience. They're obviously coming from all over the world, but I think age is going to be the biggest factor that if fans give the players time to actually settle in, I think it's going to be because they're younger and nothing else other than that.
The kind of same question, but in terms of fans' expectations for the season, do you think if we see progress kind of similar to what we've seen under Gerrard, that we're going to give the players and the management time to get it right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the big thing about Beale. He just seemed directionless. Fans couldn't see what was happening or he was trying to do. And there was just a lack of understanding because I don't think he knew what he was trying to do. And that stokes the fire of the anger and the frustration if that's the case. If you can see things, we saw Gerrard building towards a team. We saw what the system was under Gerrard almost immediately. And so although it didn't always come together, he got that extra time. And I mean, it also helped that he was Steven Gerrard as well, which is that's about the side. But there's an American football coach, Vince Lombardi, and he said the only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. So if we can see the work and see the effort building towards success, then we'll give the players a bit more leeway. Yes, they'll still get it in the neck from certain quarters, and in game they'll still boo every misplaced pass, but there won't be that sort of that really poisonous aspect that some of the players we got to by the end of last season. So we need to see the work, we need to see the effort, and we need to see it build into something. If we see that, they'll get a bit more leeway. If they don't, though, then that'll be when the real pressure will come in.
Guy, I've kind of put a couple of questions for your comments away just to kind of wrap up on that. So Paul's asking if Tav goes, do you think Devine will be able to be a backup for Sterling?
I think Motherwell fans were quite impressed with him, so if he's proven he can play at this level, I don't see why he can't be a backup. obviously I know I don't know if anything's confirmed with the new kind of Champions League setup about homegrown rules, but I've seen quite a few people talking about how it's essentially getting scrapped, or they're really like dialing down on how many homegrown players that you need because there's some legal issue with demanding that. Apparently, that's what I was reading earlier on today, that there's a legal issue with demanding that players from certain regions or areas have to be included. So from that standpoint, we obviously wouldn't need him as much, but he's shown he can do it at the level of the Scottish game. So like I'd be quite happy with him being the backup, to be honest.
Doug, Mr. Shades is asking, should we not be signing a striker that knows the league? I am not going to have any input in that question whatsoever, because everybody in their granny knows my answer.
The goal's the same shape, no matter what league you play in. So a striker needs to be able to score goals, and everything else they can learn. You could take Dessus as an example. I mean, he didn't start off well, but he grew into his game and started scoring goals. And he's not where I still think there's the potential for him to be better next season as well. I think we've been too quick to ignore the fact that this was his first season in Scottish football. And you know, if this was teams of old when we were winning, and we had a player who came in and got 20 goals in their first season, would be singing the praises. The only reason that it's not is because, again, we still don't have enough players around about that are chipping in. You know, we talk about him not having scored in big games. He scored twice against Celtic and twice got them unfairly taken away from him. So I think there's more to come from him potentially. But yeah, I think that ultimately, if you get a striker that knows where the goal is and you set them up with chances, they will score goals. The league part that they'll be able to learn.
Everybody in the comments, I've seen a lot of chat about potential Rangers captains tonight if Tav and Goldson. Obviously, the gallant few broke this morning on their daily news show that Tav had agreed terms with Aletifak. But if you're interested in what the ingredients are of Rangers captains, a subject we've already covered here at Rangers Journal, just click in the live section and head down. It was only done like a fortnight ago. You'll be able to find it, no problem. So thanks for tuning in. Kai, you get any final thoughts, mate?
Just I'm going to do a wee shout out for the gallant few actually, Scotty, because I seen, obviously it was Scott Young that kind of hosted it this morning. They broke the news about Tab, and I seen quite a few people maybe doubting the information, but I just want to say the only reason I had an NCL profile ready was because sure it was Colin that was on that morning. They broke the news that there was interest in Clinton Enciala, and I just seen the name Enciala on the pod, looked everywhere, couldn't find the information anywhere online, any articles or anything. But I went, spoke to him kind of about it, and then I done the profile, and then Rangers signed him a few days later. So I wouldn't be so quick to rule out the information that they're getting, because they were the first with Enciala, and like I said, I looked, I always check kind of sources, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I'd maybe pay a bit more attention to that information. But apart from that, just want to say kind of usual thanks everyone for watching. It's a pod I really enjoyed. It's a bit of a different subject, kind of looking into players and how they adapt and what the club can do. So it's great being on again.
Magic, mate. Magic. As somebody that has podded with Gallant Few plenty of times, I can firmly back up that their source will probably be credible. If it's came from where I think it's came from, it will be credible. Doug, you get any final thoughts, mate?
Just one minor thing I just thought was amusing and would be fun to share. Obviously, we touched a little bit on player liaison officers today. And when I was doing my research, I read a couple of articles, and there was a former Fulham liaison officer who was once called by a player because his goldfish was swimming the wrong way around its tank. So I just thought that was a funny story. So that's the kind of thing that the Katie might be dealing with, depending on the quality of individuals we get. Hopefully it'll be something more exciting. But I just thought that was a funny story.
I've just seen a Scotland lineup, and now Billy Gilmour's starting the starting lineup, so I'm happy that Steve Clark's seen sense. Shanklin's still not starting, so I'm not happy about that. But anyway, we'll be back tomorrow night with more Rangers related content, and then we'll have our Rangers news show on Friday, which we'll kind of talk about the Connor Barn and anything related to Rangers that's happened throughout the week. We're trying to kind of cover specific specialist topics kind of during the middle of the week in between our Scotland pods and our Rangers news pods, so that we're not kind of speaking about the same stuff all the time. So tune in for that tomorrow night. And obviously we'll be back with the Rangers news on Friday. Like and subscribe, and always remember, every night's Rangers Journal night.